money left for necessities. Cut out meat, eat toast and beans. You gotta live inside your means. Solvency is killing me. No money left for luxuries. Neither sport, any NTV. Cut out Sky and UPC, but some people live these different sorts of lives. They sign their assets over to their wives. Fly away and file for bankruptcy. Oh, while you and I are left to fry, pay their debts until we die. Find out hard to justify when money can't buy me. Money can't buy me house and home and habitation.
How are you, Dublin? Whose water? Whose water? Whose water? Kenny in your ivory tower! Well, we're nearly there. A lot done, not much more to do. It's great to see you all again in tens of thousands. Obviously, a lot of people think we've almost won this, and you know what? They're right. The private school boys in the cabinet are having a few problems getting their heads around it, you know. The democracy concept doesn't really come in PhD form in Montenotte. But they'll get there in the end. They'll have a little bit of a sulk. That was last week. Spit their dummy out, run off with the ball, look for a bit of an adjournment. They'll get their heads around it. And in the end, we're almost over the line. Alan Kelly's a bit of a different story. We might need to have a collection for some therapy lessons before old Alan. He's been in a bit of a dark room since February 2016, when he was primarily responsible for reducing the Labour Party from 37 seats to 7 seats. He hasn't really got his head around that one yet. He's been in a bit of a dark space. He's colonised the Sean O'Rourke show on RTE radio. I don't know if you've noticed that. They're calling it the Alan Kelly show now. He'll be okay. I think we'll have a bit of a collection later. We'll get him a good therapist, send him on a bit of a holiday. I hear he knows a few people in New York, might take him over there. Put him up on Wall Street for a while and consolidate his head around the fact that they're not getting our water. Listen, this is a big one for us because we've been working, you've all been working for 3 years. And part of the gig at these Right2Water gatherings is that people love to march and all that, but they drift away before the end. We're going to try to wrap this up in an hour. We've got a special guest who's going to join us on stage at the end. 2 special guests, actually, who I think you'll really, really enjoy. So I'd ask you on this occasion to stick with us for the hour. We really have some important people we have to speak. We've got people representing the bus air and strikers who are going to be coming on late as well. So without further ado, we get into the speakers. And the first speaker, TD for Dublin South Central, Breed Smith. Breed, you're very welcome.
Thanks, Brandon, and I'm really proud to be speaking here today. I think one thing I want to say is that we all of us in this country have learned a hugely valuable lesson over the last 3 years. And that lesson is simple, that people power works. And that every single one of us, despite what they'll tell us, have power. We have power when we work together in unity, when we stick together, and when we fight together. And people power has shown this government that water charges are dead. And later on, we'll hear from the bus workers who are also showing points, and one of the points he makes is that the European Union will not be satisfied with the arrangement that we have for not paying for excessive use. Isn't it extraordinary that Simon Coveney gets upset about the European Union and their directive on water, and yet they're going to pay millions to appeal the decision on the Apple tax that we are owed 13 billion? So that's another lesson we have learned. And finally, just to say, there is unfinished business here regardless of what happens. Nobody should go to jail for protesting against water charges. I heard somebody recently quote Pádraig Pearse, and I thought it was a great one today. Pádraig Pearse said, "I say to my people's masters, beware. Beware of the thing that is coming. Beware of a risen people, for they shall take what ye would not give." Who do they think they are? We have won.
Thank you, Breed Smith, and without further ado, from the same constituency, Joan Collins TD. Joan, you're very welcome.
Whose water? Whose water? For the past week or so, we have been treated to an incredible farce over a roundabout something that doesn't exist. That is the excessive use of water. None of the parties, Fine Gael, Labour, Fianna Fáil, involved in this row have any right to be righteous about water usage. These are the people who presided over decades of underinvestment in our water system, which has allowed up to 47% of our treated water, expensive treated water, leak away through our antiquated system of underground pipes. They have a neck. We have a European Commissioner pontificating about conserving water and making the polluter pay, who has nothing to say about the fact that nearly half of our treated water is willfully wasted by this government and successive governments. We will also not find anyone in the media who love this tremendous campaign writing about the scandalous willful waste of treated water. It is hard to figure out what Fine Gael are up to. Are they trying to leave a loophole to which charges can be brought back and redevelop their privatisation agenda in the future? Oh, are they? Are they after taking a political battering and trying to save face? Or is it handbags at 50 paces between Leo and Simon? Who knows? As far as I'm concerned, who cares? It's not in their hands. It's not in Fianna Fáil's hands. The defeat of the water charges, the ending of the installation of water meters, no water poverty are huge victories down to you, the movement of people power. You are the risen people. So what remains to be achieved? The toxic entity of Irish water to be replaced with a national water board. We need a referendum to enshrine our public water in public ownership. As part of the bill, I have moved in the Dáil with support of the Right2Water TDs. And finally, we've had over 200 people nationwide who have been and are being brought to the courts, imprisoned, fined, and one young person convicted of false imprisonment, with 25 more people facing trial under the same ludicrous charge. I'm going to finish on this. This movement must and will continue until all these outrageous attempts to criminalise protest has been defeated. Let a message go out today from this demonstration to Fine Gael. Back off and accept the advice of your guru, Michael Noonan, and get the cat off the pitch. Fine Gael, when you're in a hole, stop digging unless you want to be buried.
Joan Collins, I hope she doesn't leave the house in as much of a mess as she left the stage. Can we have the photograph of the three gentlemen on the screen there behind me, please? You know, on a slightly more sombre note, since we started out on this journey, quite a few citizens who have been with us all along have passed away. and I think it's only appropriate to remember some of them on behalf of all that we've lost in the last 3 years. At every Right2Water demonstration until this one, there was a steward called Joe McGarren. Joe was a street trader and a representative of Mandate Trade Union, a committed trade unionist who lost his life very suddenly just over a month ago. The last time we had a Right2Water demonstration, I walked down Georgia Street with Comrade Joe Kelly. Joe would have been 79 today, and Joe passed away just before Christmas, and we remember him today. And we remember Jimmy Sharkey, who was on social media promoting this demonstration as recently as Thursday, until he passed away. And there have been many others. Wacky Dempsey was one of the first who spoke at the very first Right2Water demonstration. So for them and for all of our friends, I'd ask you all to give a minute's applause for those who have been on this journey but cannot be with us here today. Thank you. And you know, on a slightly happier note, and I know the 3 lads and everyone else that we've lost would have enjoyed this campaign, and this campaign is you. This campaign is the people of Ireland who stood in Toher and Cork and said that meter's not going in here, who stood in Edenmore and who stood all around the country, who marched, who refused to pay, who engaged in civil, peaceful disobedience, and who has run not one, but 2 governments ragged in their attempt to steal our human right to water. And this campaign, and I don't think I'm the only one that will be struck by the irony of what I'm going to say next, this campaign has won an international award. You have won an international award. Here it is, in the last few weeks, when a British civil society group received a nomination that the Right2Water campaign should be in a competition with 4 UK campaigns for the best campaign in Ireland and Britain over the last number of years. And in Oxford 3 weeks ago, Right2Water, every one of you won that. So give yourself a round of applause. You'll be a long time winning any awards from the Irish establishment, I can tell you. So enjoy this one. We don't need awards though. We wanted victory, and we're very close to victory. And in a moment of victory, just before we have the next speaker, I'm going to invite up here a very, very good friend of mine, a gentleman called Len Hansard. How are you, brother? Where have you been hiding the last few weeks?
On your holidays.
And Len's going to sing a song, and then we go into the next speaker. How are you, Matty?
Just turn this guitar down, whoever's dealing with it. We're going to sing you a song by a dear friend of ours called Mick Christopher. This is a song of celebration. This is a song that really brings together what this is and what this is today. This is a song about cheering ourselves today. It's also a song about sticking the finger to the man. Hey, for the sun, for the light, for the right to our water, we've come to unite, to be heard here and after. We've been down, but we're back, 'cause we're versed in these matters and we'll rise. So we did a little march and we walked, made a sound for the people, made a mighty call to the right, to the tall, and to the despots. We're not fooling around, now feeling a gale, we're looking good, and we've got our friend. And this is our day, baby, and we're not gonna be afraid to shine, and we can make our day last forever. And if that what it's all about, oh, living in our own honorable way. And when we lack a little strength, there's a sign to get it past us. We're ripping up the rules, 'cause it's time. Make our own minds and making it last us. 'Cause we're not alone, this is our home, and we know what the banks are after, and we'll rise. We're not fooling around now, Fine Gael. We're looking good, and we've got our friend. Sing it. And this is our day, baby, and we're not gonna be afraid to shine, and we can make our whole day last forever. Oh, and ain't that what it's all about? Just as oh yeah. So we had ourselves a march, and when we're done, you better come to your senses, or we're gonna rise, rise, rise. And this is our day, baby, and we're not gonna be afraid to shine, and we can make our and this is a great day for you, Coveney. This is a final day for you, Coveney. Nice one.
Where would you get them? Where would you get them? Good man, Glenn. Good man, Matthew. There's Matthew Devereaux. Hope you enjoyed that. Now, we want to welcome to the stage, in terms of getting back to the speeches, TD, who's been very, very central to all that goes on in the water campaign, who's up to his neck with other things at the moment as well. Welcome to the stage, please, Paul Murphy. Paul.
Thanks, Brendan. I think we can all nearly taste the victory now. After 3 years of mobilising, of organising, of refusing to pay, we've almost defeated the water charges. But the establishment, in the way that they do, are mobilising. They're mobilising to try to maintain a toehold for water charges, to maintain some sort of backdoor to come back again in the future with charges. And they mobilise in the way that they mobilise, which is by sending letters. Simon Coveney sent a letter the other night to the Water Committee. Commissioner Vella sent a letter the other day to Simon Coveney. That's how they mobilise, to try in a rearguard action to defend water charges. And this is our response. This is how we mobilise to say the writing is on the wall, read it, scrap the charges. They're mobilising because they don't want to be beaten, because water charges are strategically important for them. But they're also mobilising because they don't want the lesson to go out, that they can be beaten, that if we rise up together, that we can win, and that mass civil disobedience can be successful. That's also the reason that they're trying to criminalise protest. In 2 weeks' time, a trial will take place that will determine whether sitting down on the road and slow marching is kidnapping or if it's a form of protest. The first 7 of 18 adults on trial for the protest in Jobestown against Joan Burton in November last year, November 2014, will take place. And if we're convicted of false imprisonment, the defendants, many of whom are here today, will be going to prison for long times potentially. I'll be removed from the Dáil in another attack on people's democratic rights to decide on who represents them. And most importantly, everyone's right to protest will have been taken away. Because this is about revenge, revenge for the humiliating defeat we are about to inflict on them. But it's also about sending a message. It's about sending a message to anyone who would seek to use the tactics that we have used of mass protest, mass civil disobedience. It's about those who would protest for abortion rights. It's about those who would protest against wars. It's about trade unionists who would stand up for their terms and conditions. It's about saying that you can't protest anymore because it's criminal. And you probably know that a 17-year-old has already been found guilty of false imprisonment. And he was found guilty in a children's court and he had no jury. And the judge said he was guilty because he sat down, because he encouraged others to sit down in front of Joan Burton's car, and because he momentarily delayed Joan Burton. That's it. And he was found guilty. The benefit that we have is that we supposedly have the right to a jury of our peers who'll decide whether it's kidnapping or whether it's false imprisonment or whether it's the right to protest. But the problem now is that the DPP is trying to take our right to a jury of our peers away from us. The DPP has applied to the judge to say that if you're from Tallaght, you can't be on the jury. If you're in a campaigning organisation that is against water charges, you can't be on the jury. That's if you're a member of any trade union in this country, for example. Or if you've ever expressed an opinion on water charges in public, on social media, or anywhere else, you can't be on the jury. So nobody in this crowd who is our peers, none of you could be part of the jury. And so it's a blatant attempt to stack the jury against Jobestown so that they can try to get convictions. And if we get away with it, people say to us, they'll never find a jury that could convict. But people can see if they get away with that, well then maybe they could find a jury that would convict and would remove from everybody the right to protest, the right to sit down, the right to engage in slow marches. And so hopefully people can see that they're very, very serious about getting convictions and that this is about everybody. Last week, they tried to gag us. They tried to stop our freedom of speech. They tried to say Jobestown not guilty had to finish. They tried to say we couldn't speak out like I am now about what's happening in our court case, about what's happening in our trial. And we said as Jobestown not guilty, we reject that gag. The way to defend our freedom of speech is by exercising it, by saying to people as we are now, what's happening, what attack is taking place on the right to protest. But also, the way to defend the right to protest is by exercising it. So we need everyone here to be back on the streets in 2 weeks' time and bring someone with you at 1 o'clock at Central Bank in a march for justice. with 2 clear messages from today and from 2 weeks' time. Don't stack the jury. Protest is not a crime. Jobestown not guilty. Thank you very much.
We always try to broaden it beyond water, because as Enda Kenny once told us, he had to get something right once, you know. He once told us it's not just about the water. It isn't just about the water. It's about the sort of country we live in, the sort of society we live in, what we want to turn this country into. And a guest speaker is a pleasure to call her on stage here today. Vera Toomey is going to talk to you about an amazing journey she's been on, a major challenge in her life. And it's going to take a few minutes longer than the political speaker, so I'd ask you all to listen very, very carefully to Vera. Vera, you're very welcome.
I'm very nervous. I'm really so delighted to be invited here to speak with you today. When I was asked to come here today, the first question I asked was what would I have to say, maybe about water, and I thought about it, and I thought, you know, there's a lot of injustice happening about what we're going through with our daughter, but when we were building our extension onto our house, it happened that we had to pay €2,000 to the government to facilitate whether or not we might want in the future to connect to the water mains outside in the road, even that we had a well inside that we wanted to use ourselves. And I think that's a good example of the kind of carry-on that's going on in this country. There's massive injustices going on all over the world at the moment. Regarding medicinal cannabis, there's 11 countries in Europe that have medicinal cannabis, and they have it in Australia, America and Canada, and I think that we deserve it here. I do not want to facilitate the HSE. I do not want to facilitate Simon Harris. I do not want to take my daughter on a 10-hour flight over to Canada so that I can gain a prescription for medicinal cannabis to come back to Ireland to facilitate the people in the government here. I want to take my daughter into Cork. I want to have medicinal cannabis prescribed to me by the neurologists that care for my children, for my child. I do not want to see the people that I have met over the last 2 years left in the cold, left in the dark, because the Compassionate Access Programme includes pharmaceutical medication with a CBD basis to suit the pharmaceutical companies. We want whole plant medicinal cannabis, and we deserve it now. My daughter started Charlotte's Web CBDI last October, and her seizure count is down from 500 or more a month to 3 and 4 a month. We're still getting them, and we're being treated like second-class citizens in this country because countries all over the world have access to THC medication. Countries all over the world have access to first-class medication that I'm not allowed access for, Eva, and that you're not allowed access for your relations and for your family members. And is it right, lads? No! Are we going to put up with it? No!
Your child is our child!
I tell you, lads, our family deserves a medication that works. Does your family deserve a medication that works? Yes. The sisters and brothers and mothers and fathers that are looking for this medication, they need it now. And they need to listen above in the government that the legislation is prepared, that the bill is there waiting, that the bill is being stalled, and it has to stop now. And I'd ask you to stand with us, because the injustice that's been done to us is fundamentally are being changed by medicinal cannabis.
I've had the pleasure of being at every one of these marches, and I've got to say the weather has got better for this one. Everything is improving about this campaign. If we hadn't, in solidarity, taken to the streets when this first came about, the one thing that you could guarantee is that we would now have full cost recovery for water, and that would mean hundreds of euros that you would be paying, and that's something that we could guarantee. And essentially, citizens essentially what they wanted to do was turn citizens who have rights into customers of Irish water. And we're being preached at the moment in relation to waste. Can you think of an organisation that was more wasteful than Irish Water? We had consultants, and we had pensions that were gilt-edged, and we had yoga classes. That's what we had. Remember it. And we're being preached at the moment in relation to waste. It was a utility that was well able to waste, but while they were wasting your taxes, and they were wasting your taxes in the darkest of times, when you were being lumped with additional taxes and charges, and when your services were being cut. And at the same time, miraculously, the metering contracts were awarded to Sierra, or most of them were awarded to Sierra, who happened to be a subsidiary of SiteServe, a Dennis O'Brien-owned company. This was always about more than water. This was about the golden circle being advantaged. And this is why people weren't going to be allowing themselves to be taken for fools. And this is why people turned out in numbers. And one of the most interesting things about walking on this march and each of the other marches is listening to people. It's ordinary people. It's people who never protested before that came out in their tens of thousands right across the country. And then they not only did that, but then they acted when a general election came, and the majority of TDs that were elected on an anti or an abolish water charges ticket. Now, we've been put through the Water Committee, and now we're coming to the tail end of that Water Committee, and it's D-Day. And all that has happened has been a democratic decision that you made has been postponed. You have done your job up to now, and now that job has to be taken by us, and we need to finish that off, and we need to finish that off next week in the Dáil by adopting that report and ending this nonsense. I just want to finish by sending my solidarity to the bus airing workers. For my sins, I'm on the Transport Committee, and we've had Minister Ross in front of us on a number of occasions now, and it's nothing to do with him. The problem is that there aren't just two sides to this dispute, worker and company. There are three sides to this dispute, and he needs to stand up and take responsibility for his side and end this dispute now. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine, and thank you for staying with us. I know the people down the back can see everything that's going on those big screens, which is great. So from one powerful parliamentarian to another, please welcome on stage the Deputy President of Sinn Féin, Mary Lee McDonald TD. Mary Lee, you're welcome.
Is Intag and Slua and So and you. What a crowd, what a turnout for this march, this demonstration, this definitive moment, I hope, when finally we say goodbye to water charges, to metering, and to the attempt by the elite of this state to privatise our water. The position of Irish men and women from the beginning has been that water is a human right, and we have won that argument. People like you and thousands more who marched on the streets won that argument. The general election last year, in the ballot box, we won the argument. And now, for a third time in this Dáil committee, our argument has carried the day once again. So to those in Fine Gael, or Fianna Fáil, or the Labour Party, if you remember them, who would lecture us, the likes of us, about democracy, let's say very clearly to them from this demonstration, this is what democracy looks like. And whatever their personal views, whatever the view of Simon Coveney, he has no option but to respect the democratic view of the people. That is his job. He has no right to attempt to face us down. He has no right to decide that he will look the other way. I see a sign here, and it reads, Ireland, probably the most corrupt country on earth. And you know, that makes me very sad, and it makes me very, very angry. Because Ireland is probably the greatest nation on earth. Or certainly we are among them. But the corrupt class, the insiders, the entitled classes who have run this place since partition in the 1920s have to be faced down. They have to be faced down and told very clearly that in a republic the people are sovereign, that in a republic democracy reigns, and in a republic we serve the needs of the many, not just the few. All of you have achieved this victory in facing down water charges, but you've done much, much more than that. You've now created a platform and a chance and a hope that we can become the least corrupt country on the face of the earth, that we can become a place in which Vera Toomey and Ava, her 7-year-old daughter, are served by their politics and their politicians, a country in which no mother or father of any child has to resort to taking to a platform at a demonstration simply to save their child's life. Simon Coveney, Leo Varadkar, Enda Kenny, different names, same substance. Hear us loud and clear. You lost. We won. Acknowledge that, accept that graciously, and bring the law next week or the week after that abolishes these charges. My shiv, Ganairiling, Guramila Mila Mahagwav.
Thank you very much, Mary Lou. You've been very, very good sticking with us. We've just 3 more speakers now. The next speaker we have is a community speaker, then the bus workers, and then a very, very special finish. But for now, one of the most committed community activists that has been at the heart of this campaign in this city from Dublin South Central. Not only this campaign, but campaigns such as the anti-TTIP campaign. It came as a bit of a shock to me the other night, actually, that Brendan hadn't been on the stage with us at any of these events. It's long overdue. Big welcome, please, to Brendan Condren from Crumlin Drumnet. Brendan.
How y'all doing? I'm going to talk to you today about protesters and protesting. If you remember when this all kicked off, the mainstream media labelled us all as thugs and terrorists and layabouts and the sinister fringe. Well, I'm going to read out some names to you now, and I want you to tell me who falls into the category of terrorists and sinister fringe. We have Suzanne O'Flynn, Donna Thompson-Griffin, Mary Casey, Pamela Flynn, Amy Malone, Audrey Clancy, Siobhan Walsh, Carol Watson-Purcell, Mary Dalton, Rona Hart, Marion Gannon and Glenda Guilfoyle, Fiona Nichols and Bernie Hughes, Antoinette Courtney, Angela Higgins, Ciara Hendrick and Aoife Hendrick. And from our own group, we have Sandra Johnson, Sandra Martin, Eve Bracken, Lisa Furlong, Donna Wilson and Adele Kenny. Now those three have been known to have a sinister fringe, but I don't think that's what they meant. We have Carol Callahan, Tricia Lennon-Kilbride, Michelle Bourne, Anne Denoyer, Audrey Kershaw and Marie Boland Barrett. If I left anyone out, I apologise. There's way too many I could fill a phone book. You ladies are the ones who gave birth to and nurtured this movement. Mothers of Ireland, I salute you. Why did these grandmothers and mothers and wives and girlfriends and daughters and nieces, why did they decide to protest? They decided to protest because they had no other option. Now, we used to have another option to protest. When our Constitution was written, there were two safeguards put in place to protect us from the fuckers in government. Sorry for the language. We had the right to protest, and we had Article 48, which gave us the right to call people-initiated referendum if we didn't like what they were doing up in Leinster House. They took that right away from us, and they only left us with the right to protest. They didn't want us to have that right because they knew when they fucked up we'd do something about it. So peaceful protest is and was all that we have left. In the course of this peaceful protest, a lot of people have been arrested and taken to court and had to defend themselves in court. A lot of people have been found guilty of crimes. They've been sent to jail, fined and bound to keep the peace. The good people of Jobstown had a protest in their area when they found out that Joan Burton had the audacity to turn up there. She turned up and it was close to where there was recently opened food bank thanks to her government policies. Joan Burton had to sit in a car for a couple of hours laughing and joking on her phone. And a lot of these good people from Jobstown now are actually facing charges because of this. They're facing charges of false imprisonment. Are you fucking joking me? At a previous protest, I saw a man carrying a banner that said 7 years in an industrial school is false imprisonment. And I recently had the pleasure of meeting Paddy Hill, one of the Birmingham Six, and he told me and explained to me what false imprisonment was all about. He never mentioned having to sit in the car for a few hours. I'm now calling on this government if they listen to the people, accept the fact that we have won and we were right on the water charges, wipe the records clean of all those found guilty of protesting, drop all the charges that are outstanding against peaceful protesters, reinstate Article 48 and give us back our powers of recall under our Constitution. Thank you.
Well done, Brendan. Brendan Condra, ladies and gentlemen. Mark. Yeah, well done, Mark. Okay, we're now joined on stage by a group of people, bus Éireann workers. On forward, lads. Hold up your banners. Bus Éireann workers who were told by a state-owned employer that their wages would be cut by up to 30% and they were to have no say in the matter. They were forced to take their constitutional and legal rightful action to defend themselves. They've been treated disgracefully by the company, by the government, by the minister and by the media. They're very welcome here today. I'm going to address you on their behalf as Mark Kavanagh. Mark, you're very welcome, lads.
Lads, I'm just an ordinary citizen in this country, a bus driver. I was raised on a council estate in Waterford City, and I live in a lovely town of Carrigan-Shore in South Tipperary. And I see a couple of them over there. But lads, it's an absolute privilege to be here on this stage today with colleagues here, both in the National Bus and Rail Union and just bus workers here on this stage to honour you guys in your campaign. And what you did in standing up to the government is an inspiration to us in our fight for proper terms and conditions. I applaud all you guys. Seriously, lads. A personal observation on the Right2Water, lads. I remember when all this kicked off, and I really want to point out a group of people here who went above and beyond, and Enda Kenny didn't know what hit him. And I'm talking about the women of Ireland. The women of Ireland. God bless you, girls. I'm telling you what, it's the women of Ireland that control the budgets in the homes. It's the women of Ireland that pays the bills. And when Enda Kenny set up a semi-state company that he wanted to privatise in 10 years' time, he had a charge. And where was that charge going to come out of? The purse of the women of the country. And they said, shag off, you're not getting it. So lads, I won't hold you long here. As I say, we're getting absolutely hammered by this government. It's a right-wing government, the most right-wing government in the history of the state. And I am not in any political party. I'm not aligned to any political party. But I'll call things as I see them. The same people that demonised all you guys, they told you were rotten. They told you were wasters. They told you were losers. But you stood up to them. Well, we're going to stand up to them as well, lads. They keep on telling us that this is an industrial relations dispute. This is so much more than an industrial relations dispute. Sure, we'll stand up for our terms and conditions. We'll stand up for a right to a decent week's wage for a decent week's work. And no man or woman should ever apologise for that in this country. This is bigger than just us in Bus Éireann. We're fighting for every other worker in this country. We're fighting for every semi-state. Because if they get it in here, lads, they're going to ram it right the way through the semi-states. And then they're going to go into every shop floor in every factory in this country. And I can tell you one thing, there's a message coming from this stage from the workers in Bus Éireann. Shag off. You're not going to do it to us under no circumstances. And lads, there's one aspect of this dispute that's even more important than our terms and conditions, and I mean this. We were a semi-state company set up to provide transport in rural Ireland. We are the drivers in rural Ireland. We have an unspoken and an unwritten agreement, a social contract with the people of Ireland to transport them safely from the rural towns and villages right across this country. This government is undermining that. This government is abandoning people in rural towns and villages. We've seen it firsthand since 2009, after the financial crash. We have watched the decimation of rural transport through that big windscreen in the front of our bus. We have seen routes and services being pulled out for the benefit of private operators, tearing up and down the motorways from the major cities to and from Dublin. We've seen the way it affects rural Ireland. We have seen pensioners, senior citizens, the most vulnerable in our society, being stranded in villages where there's no bank, there's no post office, there's no Garda barracks, there's not even a shop to get their groceries. And what's the answer of the government? I will shag you if you have no buses as well. Well, I tell you one thing, lads, we won't stand for it. We're bus drivers, we're ordinary citizens of this country, and we will not stand for it. We need your support, lads. And I have a message. I have a particular message for all those rural TDs that are getting their big fat lumps of money up there in Dáil Éireann. We know what we get from Fine Gael. We know what we get from the Thatcherites. We expect that. We expect it from Enda Thatcher. We know all about that. But I'm talking about Micheál Martin and Fianna Fáil. Shame on you. You should be doing more for people in rural Ireland. You're propping up this outrageous right-wing government. I'm talking about the Boxamorans, the Finian McGraths and the John Hanigans down in Waterford. Supposedly left-wing politicians, my arse. They're in there and they're getting their paycheck and they're propping up this right-wing government. But I tell you one thing. I'm an ordinary citizen of this country and I will call them out. They're not representing people in rural Ireland. They're not doing the job they're getting the money for. Get off your arses, represent people in rural Ireland, look after people in rural Ireland, and don't be just picking up the big fat paycheck up in Dáil Éireann. Thanks very much, lads. Thanks for your support.
Well done, lads. Resounding support for Oakers. An injury to one is an injury to all. Their struggle is all of our struggles. And I think Mark makes very important points in relation to rural Ireland. This is a national movement. Brilliant support throughout Dublin. Most of our demonstrations are in Dublin. We couldn't do it without the Dubs, to be honest with you, and for a culture that's not an easy thing to say. But it is nevertheless a national movement, and I'm reminded of that when I look over to the left, just how big it is.